Do it. So, okay. Well, welcome to the April Skill Builder. And we have a number of explanations and apologies and everything before we get started today. But first of all, I apologize for being in front of you so often because I have a fear that you might be getting tired of listening to me. Get my water over here. I fear you may be getting tired of listening to me, but I truly enjoy being up here talking about woodworking and certainly about tools. And the reason I'm up here, this is kind of a quickly put together thing. I'm pinch hitting this afternoon for whoever Kevin Thomas might have elected to do the skill builder, but Kevin Thomas is laid up from a serious fall injury, and as I understand, he's still in the hospital, and he had to have cranial surgery to relieve brain bleeding, and so Kevin is having kind of a rough time. And Mike McCauley and Norman Carpenter and I kind of scrapped our experiences together, and they nominated me to be here today. So with that said, I'm happy to be here. I might explain to you that I have done this presentation before, and I want to show you my notebook here, because I took out my computer and I copied the presentation I made before, and I put a new date on it. So this is a basic personal toolbox, and the first date is 7/09/2019. That's when I did this the first time. And today is 04/01/2023. So this is a repeat presentation, but I do want you to know that I did go and review the notes, and I have them here, so I won't forget to tell you anything I told the guys 5 years ago. And, so to start out with today, I want to first of all a couple of apologies. Most of you know me, and I teach the classes, and I'm pretty direct in what I think and what I say, and my opinions, and you know, that's due to experience, and the fact that every tool I'll show you this afternoon I have personally used, and as Norman put in the write-up, I own most of them. And when I do this, I don't mean to criticize your technique or your tool at all. If it works for you, I say, hey, that's a terrific tool, and it works for you, Bob or Joe or Jim, whatever your name is, and you keep doing it. And the reason why I do this kind of presentation is if you want to try a new tool, or you're searching out what tool to buy, or you just want some ideas on tools. That's why I do it. So I'm not criticizing you or your tools. I don't mean to disparage tool makers, but in my experience, there's some good ones, and there's some not so good ones, and there's some bad ones, and there's some just plain old crummy ones. So you want to be on the lookout for those, and I'll give you a few notes on what to look for. So I don't want to badmouth anybody's tools, but I will tell you what I've been most successful with. Now, I also maybe practice a technique that's different from yours, and heaven forbid it may be different than their grandfathers. And I don't want to demean your grandfathers, because I'm as old as most of them. So it's just again, experience teaching. And one of the advantages of being a shop foreman around here is you get to see everybody when they come in, and you get to see their tools, and you get to see them using your tools, or using their tools. And then when you teach a few classes around here, you see a lot of levels of experience. Some pretty good, some not so good, and some just plain atrocious. And one of the things I hope to be able to help you with, if you haven't thought about a tool or thought about using a tool a certain way, take a note of it. Nothing I say is absolutely right, because you'll develop your own technique, you'll develop your own favorite tools, and you'll learn to use them in spite of whether the tool does a great job, or it's a fine tool or not. So I get to see everything, and some of the frequently asked questions that I get asked, people walk through the door and they, honestly say, I want to learn woodworking, and the next question is, what tools do I need? Okay, What tools do I need is a fair question, and the answer is variable. If you're basic, just starting out, you need a few good tools, and it is amazing how few tools you need. If you're an advancing woodworker and you're moving from simple projects to a little more complicated projects, the project itself may require a tool that you haven't used before. And then if you're moving into stuff like marquetry, if you're moving into inlay, where's our inlay expert? Hello, Wayne. If you're moving into that, or you're moving into something like musical instrument building or something like that, you need some specialty tools, and unfortunately many times they're expensive, they're rare, and they are hard to learn to use. So on some of those I hope to maybe point you in the right direction on those. One of the questions I had in the past, a young lady walked through the door, had this nice box, and she said, I have my grandfather's number 45 Stanley hand plane. I want to learn to use it. What do I use it for? What's wrong with that question? The fault with that question is if you don't know what to use a tool for, you don't need it. Okay? You need a tool to do something that you want to do. Some operation, some cut, some polish, whatever. So the answer there is, if you're not sure of why you need the tool, maybe review your requirements and review your toolbox and see if you can do that a different way. My question to this young lady was precisely that. If you're not sure what you want to use it for, then you have a lot to learn before you get to its simplest use. Because, unfortunately, she picked one that's got a long learning curve. The Stanley number 45 hand plane, if you're not familiar with it, is a multi-plane, and it's got 23 different blades, and it's got 2 sets of spacer bars, and it's got an optional sled on it, and it's got a center cam rest, and it's got about maybe 4,000 possible adjustments to it. And when you master that hand plane, you really know what you're doing, but it's a specialty plane. So if you're looking for specialty tools, take a glimpse of why you need it, what you want to use it for, and then make the effort to use that tool the way it was intended. Then I get the question all the time, I'm in here 3 Saturdays a month. The second, third, and fourth Saturday mornings, I'm shop foreman, and I continuously get the question, do I need a whatever tool? And you fill in the blanks there. Do I need that tool? And my answer is no, but possibly when you learn why you might need it. The valid reason for buying a tool is if you need it for a project that you're doing, or you want to learn it, or want to learn how to use it for a future project. Now there's a real valid reason for buying tools that have nothing to do with woodworking and have nothing to do with the tools you have, and that is if you just gotta have it and life wouldn't be fun without it, then you buy one of those tools. And Wayne is laughing. Wayne and I both have tool chests full of tools that we just gotta have, and some of the rest of you are like that. And I've got this strange disease. It's called the hand tool disease. And what that means is not that I only work with hand tools. That means when I touch a tool of any kind, my hand sticks to it, and I've got to take it home with me and learn how to use it. So that's those are the reasons why you buy tools, and then hopefully you'll learn how to use them. I get this question all the time, and I want to. In my last presentation, I reviewed this with you if you were here, and you'll tire of hearing this from me. But I get the question: is this, whatever it is this good enough to learn with? Okay. I want you to promise me that after this conversation, you will never say that again. Never, never, never. Because good enough to learn with is a myth. If you buy a low quality tool or a poorly designed tool, one that won't do the job for you, you do not learn anything except it is a terrible chore to use a bad tool. That is the only thing you learn. And people say, well, tools are very expensive. You know, that is true. Tools are very expensive, but they are a lifetime investment. Some tools are expendable. You sharpen them down, you wear them out, you break them. But for the most part, a tool is a lifetime investment. And a good example, and we'll talk about this later. Anybody know how old this little plane is? It was manufactured in the 1920s. It is a Miller Falls number 56B. This plane I'll hold up against any Lee Nielsen, and I use Lee Nielsen planes all the time. I'll hold this plane up against any Lee Nielsen for the work that I do. I do musical instrument work, I do small boxes, I do build some fishing rods and stuff like that. This is a low angle plane, and it is the lowest angle block plane that you'll find. This is a number 56B Miller Falls plane. If you find one in a flea market or an antique shop or a garage sale, buy it, because that is the finest little plane that you can buy. I've had this one since the 70s, so I've used it over 50 years, but it was manufactured in the 20s, and it's a perfect little hand plane. I got to confess to you, every time I find one, I buy it. I currently have 3. They're not that common, but if you find one, buy it. Okay. Erase that myth from your mind. Let's talk about a basic toolkit, because every woodworker needs a basic toolkit, and a basic personal toolkit is a good idea for every woodworker, whether you're a handyman, a hobbyist, a serious beginner, a hand tooler, or a practicing expert. And and guild members often rely on having the tools that they need in the shop tool cabinet back here. Okay, that is okay in a pinch, you know, if you don't have the tool yet, but they're problems. When you come in here, we may have 2 or 3 hand planes, but what if you walk through the door and they're all in use? Somebody's using them, and if you have to wait on a tool, you're sitting here wasting your shop time waiting on the tool. And if you use that tool often, it's a good idea for you to have your own. So all the tools may be in use, and you'll have to wait or share. Sadly enough, the tools in our cabinet are sometimes not ready to use in good condition and may not be sharp. Those 2 things I can almost promise you, because people come in here and they use tools, and either they don't know how to use them and they misuse the tool, or they just flat don't care and put the tool back in the cabinet. You shouldn't do that, because it makes you unhappy when you come in here and try to use a tool, and if you don't put it back clean and sharp and in good order, then the next guy that wants to use it feels the same way that you do when you come in here and the tool is not ready to go. Everyone over time develops their own favorite setup on tools, and you or your work may use a different cutting angle on chisels or planes than somebody else. So you can't count on the tools in here fitting your work precisely. And by that I mean some people that, in fact, the work that you do determines the tool setup, even on chisels or planes. And let me give you a good example on that, because if you work mostly soft woods, the pines or cedars, the poplars, and you know, that kind of wood, soft, what they call diffuse porous woods, then you can use a narrower, a slighter cutting angle on your chisels or planes than on hardwoods. And on my work, most of the time, I sharpen my chisels and my planes to either 25 or 27 degrees. And that gives you a much keener, sharp edge, and you can cut soft woods like that, and it takes off very nice shavings. The disadvantage to that low angle cut is if you use that same chisel or plane on hardwoods, the hardwoods will curl the edge quicker, and the plane will dull, or the chisel will dull. And so people who continuously work maple, oak, walnut, any of the harder woods, they generally sharpen their plane irons and their chisels to 30 degrees. And sometimes they even sharpen them to higher if they use the exotic tropical woods like rosewood, zebra wood, purple heart, that kind of stuff, because those woods are abrasive, and they're very hard on tool edges. One of the problems is you may like wooden handles over plastic handles. How many of you old timers like plastic handle tools? Nobody. How many of you like wooden handle tools? And why? Because they feel better. When you pick them up, they're not cold, and they feel better, and they just feel better in your hand. So we got a lot of plastic handle tools back there. One of the problems that you run into, and especially if you're a young lady, you may like a lighter tool than the heavier tools the guys use. And a good example of that is a number 5 hand plane. This is a record number 5 hand plane. It's an English-made hand plane, and if you pick it up at the end of this thing, you'll note that it is very heavy. And American-made planes were lighter than that. If you like a lighter plane and you don't eat a lot of oatmeal for breakfast, then a lighter plane comes in pretty handy. So you might like a lighter tool. So acquiring and maintaining your tools will make you a better woodworker. Why? It makes you a better woodworker because you learn to size your tool kit and the quality of your tool kit to the work that you do. And that carries your woodworking to the next level. I want to discuss and recommend some tools for your kit that every woodworker uses from time to time, and they're nice and handy to have in your toolkit. We'll discuss some tool buying guides, and we'll get on with this show. And like I said, the title of the presentation is A Basic Personal Toolbox. What I want to do is hand out a tool list, and one of the things that you can do with this list is certainly reference the tools that I'm talking about here, because I will talk about them in exactly the same order as this list. And if you think you need the tool, you can write on here. You can say, you know, possibly purchase it, or yes, or just check it off that you want that tool. If you think I'm all wet, you take your pencil and mark it out. And if you want to pass those out, I hope there's enough. I didn't count people. I made 20 copies. I may press somebody into service to make some additional copies. But
If we need more, Dave, I'll get them.
okay. All right. Why do you need a personal toolbox or a personal toolkit? And you know, the reasons are very, very basic. You want to keep your tools dry, safe, and sharp. There's nothing more aggravating and nothing more detrimental to your woodworking than trying to work with a dull tool. And I don't care what kind of tool that is. You know, it can be a lawnmower, it can be a screwdriver, it can be a chisel, it can be a knife when you're slicing tomatoes for your sandwich. Dull tools just don't work. You need a toolkit, and you know, we're going to talk about boxes and bags and tote boxes and stuff, but you need to keep your tools ready at hand when you need to use them. And I got a couple of examples on what frustrates me on that. And every woodworker gets attached to his own tools. And if you don't believe that, buy you a tool and love it and keep it nice and use it every chance you get. And when you come down here and you see another tool, basically the same tool, maybe a different brand or whatever, then you pick that tool up and you'll say, mine feels better, mine works better. And the real key is mine is mine, and I'm responsible for it, and I keep it up and I use it and I protect it. So you get attached to your own tools. It's a good idea to organize a visiting set of your tools, and I don't mean, you know, an off quality set of your tools. By visiting set, I mean you do work at home if you've got a workshop at home. You do work down here if you want to come down here and work on something. You may teach a class. It's a good idea to have multiples of some tools, because you need to grab that tool set like in a box like this and put the tools that are on your list in that box and take them with you. You're visiting somewhere else, so your tools need to be mobile. And above all, you need to think of frequency of use on your projects. Do you need a tool every day that you do woodworking, or do you need it once a week, or do you only need it when you're building shelves? You know, get this mental picture in your mind, what tools you need today, and grab a box or a bag and say, I'm going to do this today at the shop. You put the tools in and you're off and running. There's nothing more maddening than to get down here and find out you left a tool at home, right? And you have to depend on one being down here, which there may not be. And if there is one, you'll probably have to sharpen it. You may have to clean it up. And so it's good to have your own tools. And possibly organize your tools by project or craft. If you do all basic boxes and you need the tools to make small boxes, make you a toolbox or a tool tote or whatever that's your box tools. I do musical instrument work. I've got a couple of toolboxes by instrument that I put the specialty tools in that box. And when I want to work on that, I grab that box. When I want to work down here on that, I grab that box. So it's a good idea to organize your tools by project or craft. If you do all marquetry or inlay, Wayne, do you have an inlay box? You got an inlay box. And what's the value of that? You know where the tools are, right? You don't have to look for a half a day remembering where you put that cutter of some sort. Let me tell you that the toolbox is not the same for everyone. So when I talk about those, the reason I said you can go down the list, you can check off the ones you need and forget the ones that you don't need, because the toolbox is not the same for everybody. It would be foolish of me to stand up here and say you need these tools and no more, or you absolutely have to have these. No, you choose the tools based on what you do. There are, to me, about maybe 3 or 4 or 5 focuses on woodworking that you need to pay attention to, and maybe place yourself in one of those. And none of them are bad. All of them work, but you need to think about whether you're a classical woodworker. And when I say classical woodworker, I mean, what kind of work do you do? Is it hand tool only and no power tools? Strangely enough, we got several guys here in our group that come down to the shop here and they don't use power tools. They're hand tools only. So if you fit in that classification, then you need to focus on those tools, and you need different tools than you do if you're a hybrid woodworker. If you're a hybrid woodworker, you use hand tools and power tools, and the key is which is better, easier, faster for the task at hand that you're going to do. And if you do specialty work, then you need specialty tools and techniques of the craft. And again, I hate to single out Wayne, but Wayne and I teach together quite often, and Wayne is a specialist in some areas. And if you want to do inlay, talk to Wayne. If you want to do Kamiko, talk to Wayne. So that's the idea. Classify your work and buy the tools that support that work. You can be a modern power tool. You can be a modern woodworker, as I call them. All power tools and gimmicks and gadgets, and no hand tools. I know some guys that come down here and say, I don't even want to know about that tool cabinet in there because I don't intend to use it. And that's okay. Depends on the work that you do. And if you, I'm here to tell you, if you do the Chippendale, or if you do the the federal woodworking, or you do any of the early American stuff, you're going to be disappointed in your machines, because you need the hand tools. You need the hand tools to get in there and do the fine stuff, and that's what you should focus on. And then you have what I call the space age woodworkers, who come in here and they only want to use the laser, or they only want to use the CNC. Okay, I don't have any gripe with those guys. In fact, I've gone to the training on those two things, and I said, those are not for me. I'm not going to become a specialist on those tools. So when I got this shop foreman badge on, you need to be careful not to ask me about that. Because I'll tell you, in my career, in my background, I could build a CNC machine, but I don't necessarily feel obligated to use one. So you need to classify yourself. Where do you fit? So the toolbox is not the same for everyone. And the idea that some people have that all hand tools is a quicker way and a more secure way to hand tool heaven is not true. Okay, there is no virtue in isolating yourself in all hand tools. So it leads us to talk basic. Like I said, it's different for every craft. For instance, hand planes. The wood turner guys back here rarely ever use a hand plane, okay? But most of us woodworkers out here rarely ever use a gouge, okay? So you need to point to what you use. Some tools are used every time you go to your shop, and some tools are used twice a year. Classify them accordingly and keep them in those categories. Some tools are critical to good woodworking practice, And I'm here to tell you that dry, clean, and sharp is highly recommended. In fact, it's almost critical to your success as a woodworker. So let's talk about now some basic tools. Look at your list there. And the first thing you see on the list are measuring and marking tools. And why do you suppose I put that first on the list? It's first in my presentation. And in the basic woodworking course, what is the first thing we teach?
Always gonna use a tape measure.
How to use a tape measure, how to use a rule, how to use a square. And because it all starts, your woodworking starts there, and if you learn how to do that well and you got good tools, that's where it also ends, because if you neglect that list of tools, when you get done, you'll see every mistake. Okay, and I'm just telling you that to warn you, because if you do a bad job of marking out, your table's going to act like it's got 3 legs. Okay, it's not going to set right. So we'll talk about those tools, and the tools I want to focus on are measuring and marking right now, because every woodworker, I don't care what your endeavor is, every woodworker needs those tools. So if you're looking at a basic toolbox, look at those tools first. And let's talk about the qualities of those tools, because it's very important. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the 12-inch adjustable square and the 6-inch adjustable square. I'm talking about these. Okay. And why do you suppose I'm picky enough to keep them in a box with nice rubber padding there? Because these tools are valuable tools, but they're also fragile tools. This tool is probably one of the most mistreated tools in the shop because of the way you keep it and the way you treat it. We got 4 or 6, I'm sorry to say, cast-off ones in the cabinet back there, and they're hanging or laying on the cabinet, and sometimes stuff is laying on top of them, and sometimes when you're in there searching for one, they drop on the floor and all of that kind of stuff. You want to cherish this tool, and you want to keep it nice, and you want to know how to choose a good tool. Now these run all separate prices and qualities, and you need to know how to pick a good one, because some of them are just absolutely deplorable. And if you got the idea of going to Menards or Lowe's or Home Depot, some of their squares there are not worth carrying out of the store because of the quality of the square. This has a steel head. Now some of them have aluminum heads, which is okay if they're quality made. But above all, you want to find a tool that is tight. It slides easily, but it has no loose parts to it, and it will lock up with a quarter of a turn. You don't need to winch that tight with pliers. And you need to choose a blade that has etched markings on it, not printed with India ink or whatever that stuff is, because it wears off. You slide it a few times and your numbers will have streaks in them, and you can find out whether they're edged or whether they're etched by taking your thumbnail and running down the scale. Hear that? It's following the etchings, and every one of those etchings have a number graduation on it. Now if you buy a quality square, those number graduations will be fairly close to accurate. Let me ask John over here. John, did you ever find 2 squares that had different measurements on it?
Oh yeah.
A quality square will have pretty well standardized graduations on it. Some of the squares you find made in our neighbors from China and Taiwan and other places, Indonesia, wherever they're made, are made with the stamping press, and they're made very quickly, and they're not inspected well. And when they come over here, you can hold two of them together, and the graduations will be different on them. And you want to be careful of that, so you want to spend a good amount of money on your squares, whether they're 6-inch or 12-inch or 9-inch or whatever. You want to spend a good amount of money, because I'm here to tell you, this tool is a lifetime tool if you take care of it. But when you finish using it, if you don't take your rag or your brush and clean it off and make sure it's not rusty and wet, and you put it back in your little case here, then it will be a good tool for a long time. And I have a Starrett square. They happen to be very good quality. I have one that I've had, I know, for 45 years. And I still use it every time I go to the shop. But if you want to buy a usable and serviceable set of squares, this is a set called Eye Gauging, is the brand, Eye Gauging. And you can go to several places, or there's a place online that you can order these called chipsfly.com. And you can get this set of squares for about $40 or $50. And that is a rock bottom price for a good set of squares. So when you're buying squares, invest in a good square and take care of it, and it will serve you well. I want to encourage you, if you ever drop this on the floor, check it for square, okay? Because the weight of this, if it hits right here, the inertia will break a little tab in here, and it'll be off square. And you need to know how to square it up, and you need to know how to check it to see if it's square, because when I said it starts and ends with this, if this doesn't work, then your table is three-legged, right? Because things don't match up. And that is a basic rule of woodworking. Buy you a set of squares, take care of them, and always remember, and I saw a guy actually do this right over on that bench, right over there. He was dry fitting a table and putting aprons into a leg, and he had a little trouble getting the tenon to fit. And he picks up his square like this, and he hit the side of the leg to drive that tenon in, and I'm sitting there and cold chills ran up my back. Don't do that to your square. And I have overdone my time on squares. I'm absolutely adamant about that. If you don't have a good square and you don't take care of it, you should just give it up and go to the ice cream store and forget about woodworking. And is my humble opinion. Let's talk about marking stuff. Does anybody know how wide the lead is on a number 2 pencil? It depends on how long it's been since you sharpened it, okay? And if that's been more than 2 or 3 marks on a number 2 pencil, then that line widens out every time you mark. And by the time it's down to where the wood starts, and you've been too negligent to run and sharpen it again, that line can be about 1/16 of an inch wide. And I'm true, you're laughing, but you know that's true. That line can be about 1/16 of an inch wide, and I'm asking you, when you want to saw that off, where do you saw? Okay? The simple way that you mark can mean the difference between a nice fitting joint and a gap in a joint. And those number 2 pencils are what keeps Weldwood and Famo Wood and that kind of people in business. You get the little can and you open it up and you push that in the crack that you made because you didn't make a good mark. Okay, learn to mark with a knife. And I use this knife, or I use an old pocket knife sometime, or you can buy specialty marking knives. And I've seen these for $3 or $4. This one costs, I think, about 10 or 12. This is actually a wood carving knife or a whittling knife, but it makes a good marking knife. And you want a knife that will stay sharp. And when you take this knife and your square, and you take this knife and your square and you put it across like this and you rest it on a firm surface, all right, and you pull this across like that, you got a knife mark that is not very wide, and it's certainly not a 1/16 of an inch wide. And when you go to your table saw, if you'll get in the habit of, I'll borrow this pencil here, if you'll get in the habit of taking your mark and say, I'm going to cut that off, so I'm cutting on that side of the mark. Okay, you make your marks with a knife, and you, if you want to transfer this mark, okay, to the side of the board, then you put your knife in that other mark that you made, and you can mark down just like that. Now you've transferred that mark all the way around. You can transfer it all the way around to the back, and you can cut a mortise on one side that comes out the same place on the other side. Okay, so it's important to know marking, and mark with the finest instrument that you can mark with, because every deviation on marking makes a difference in your finished product. How many corners does a box have? If it's a square or rectangular box, it's got 4 corners, right? If I make a 32nd of an inch error in marking my corners or my angles, if I make a 1/2 degree error in marking my angles, and we'll talk about angles later, and I've got 4 corners, how far am I off when I get the box done? If I'm a 1/2 degree off, I'm 2 degrees off on the whole box, because you add up your errors. And if you want a nice fitting in the product, then you start with good marks. In your measuring and marking kit, you need the squares, you need a marking knife or a fine line pencil. Sometimes I use 1/2 millimeter pencils, and the reason why I do is because I'm old and I need to be able to see the marks. But I'll tell you, on a 1/2 millimeter pencil lead, it doesn't get any wider than that when you mark with it. And so it's a good idea to pay attention to your marks. Now I'm going to get on to a pet peeve of mine, and I don't want to offend anybody. But how many of you have one of these? Everybody have one of these? Okay.
I still can't find it.
You know what these are good for? They're good for measuring carpet for your house. And they're good for building dog houses and decks. The problem with them is you can spend a lot of money on one of these, and most of the time they're fairly accurate. And if you're down at Metro Hardwoods and you want to see if something is 10 feet, yeah, hook it over the end. Yeah, it's 10 feet. I'll take it, and you go home and make something out of it. You ever try to set up a table saw or drill press or anything with one of these? You pull it out here, and yeah, you can mark it down, and you have to use one hand to do this, and then you're tapping the fence, and this is shaking around. These things are absolutely unwieldy for shop woodworking. If you're going to build a deck, get you one of these. If you want to do woodworking, get you a smaller tape measure that's 10 or 12 feet. I think I say 10 feet. This one's 12 feet. You can get them 16, but this is a rough measure at best. You want to use your square when you're setting up tenons and stuff like that, but this is good for, moderately accurate measurements. But the important thing is that you can hold it in your hand, and you can steady it, and you can lock it, and you can put it down on something, and you can measure with it. You don't have something that weighs 5 pounds. Okay, now what happens when you want to keep this handy? You stick it in your pocket and you walk around the rest of the day like this. All right, this you can stick it in your hip pocket and you hardly know it's there. Okay, so get you a tape that will do the work for you, and it's easy to use. A 6 or 9 inch compass or divider. Any of you guys cut dovetails or aspire to cut dovetails, you'll want one of these dividers, because every professional woodworker that describes dovetails lays them out with the divider. I don't know why. I rarely ever do that when I'm cutting dovetails, and you can see it from my dovetails. I lay them out freehand with a little mark to get the proper angle, but when I space them how they look good to me, and that works all right. So you get you a divider or a 6 or 9 inch compass. So what happened to my compass? You ever see one of these things? What'd you call them when you were a kid? Oh, that's a circle drawer. Okay, that's a compass, and you can draw up to like a 6 inch radius circle or 3 inch radius circle with this, and make curves and stuff on your work. Let me show you a shortcut that works every time. What happened to my anybody ever see that little shaker step stool that I make? The little cutout on the bottom? That is 2.5 inches in radius, and you find the center and you mark it out 2.5 inches. Did you know the top of a Crisco shortening can is better than this? And I'll tell you why. You ever see that little dot in the middle of that? This is one of the most accurate things you can find for marking out circles, and the reason for that is I got to tell you, I spent a couple of years in the plastics industry learning about plastic molding. But that little dot right there is all of the plastic to make this lid flows into the mold through that little dot. Okay, and the ram comes up and it goes and it fills this with hot plastic. And when it cools off, if that wasn't a very precisely measured cavity, and this wasn't metering the plastic in, this lid wouldn't fit on a Crisco can. And if you got it to snap down, it wouldn't stay on, because it's got to be perfectly round, and it's got to be properly tensioned on the edge. And when you draw a circle like this, you probably got a lot better circle than you can make with this. Now, what I do, and it looks kind of messy, but in my shop, every time I go get a coffee or anything at Quick Trip, I look for lids of different sizes. And I've got probably a half dozen lids in my workbench drawer that I want to draw a circle. I say that's about right, and I draw a circle like that. And it works, right? Yeah. Okay, that's that. A steel pocket rule. Most of you have seen me walking around here in the shop, and I actually do have one. Here it is, right here. This is a Starrett rule, but you can get them a lot less expensive than this, but this is a 6-inch rule. And I'm saying buy yourself a good one, and if you don't leave it somewhere, or it doesn't go home with somebody else, this again is a lifetime tool. You can carry it around with you as long as you want to carry it, and it's very handy. I've seen guys over here on the planer, you know, they will take their board out, and they want to measure how thick the board is, and they do this. They put the board here, and they do it. Yeah, that's about, and you never know really accurately how planed your board is. Get you one of these little things. You can stick it in your pocket, and you can measure and get a good measure on your thickness. And you can even use it. You go over to the jointer. You want to find out if your face is flat on the board. You can use that. Okay. You want to find out if it's straight on a short run. You can use that. This is a handy tool. Get one for your toolbox. Okay. The next thing you want to look at is a mortising gauge or a cutting gauge, and a cutting gauge and a marking gauge is different. Okay, and we have several back there, but the one that I use most of the time is what's called a wheel cutting gauge. Okay, and it's got a sharp little wheel, and it's got a sliding fence. You can mark whatever distance you want, and I'll show you a good approach to using that for marking out like tenons. Let's suppose you want an 1.5 inch. Well, 1.5 inch tenon is kind of long, but let's suppose I want a 1-inch tenon on the end of a board that I'm working on. Okay, the first thing I do is I get out my good square, and I set an inch. All right, I take this and I butt it against the stock of the square. All right, now that's an inch. All right, I can take this and I can make that inch mark all the way around this board. Okay, now let me give you a tip here, and I'll use an example. Can everybody see that little plant stand right over there? Okay, that's a plant stand that we build in the basic woodworking class, and I want to use that as an example because the stretchers on that little plant stand, they go like this, and each one of those stretchers has a tenon on each end. So there's 4 stretchers, and there's 2 tenons on each stretcher. So you guys that are good at math, how many tenons is that I have to cut? 2 times 4 is what? 8? Okay, I got 8 tenons I have to cut. How many times do you want to set up the measure for a 1-inch tenon? One time. How many times do you mark with this one setting to get your plant stand right? Okay, you put them in a pile and you mark all 8 of them at the same time. Now, another one of my stories, but this actually happened, and I'm not going to mention any names, okay, but this actually happened. We had a gentleman making that plant stand, that very plant stand, and I explained to him how to mark those tenons and cut them all 8 at the same time. And I left him be, and I came back in about 30 or 45 minutes, and he had one of them marked and one of them cut, and he went over to the to the dado saw where there was a line of people cutting their tenons, and he came back and he had one tenon cut. And he laid it down and he proceeded to mark the other end, not in another stretcher. He marked the other end and he reset his gauge in between. He did not use the same setting. He marked the other end, and I asked him, why are you doing that? And just hoping to be helpful. And he said, because I want to make sure they're both the same. And what he did was ensure that they weren't. So you want to pay attention to what you're marking and measuring. And that's how you set up a cutting gauge and get your tenons right. Now we have to talk about a mortise gauge. And a mortise gauge is like this. And you notice it's got 2 points on one side. You can loosen this and you can set those points wider or narrower depending on how wide you want your mortise. Okay? And you normally set that up and put your chisel up here and you make your mortise as wide as the chisel. Is pretty good practice. And then you mark this off. It's very important if you've got 4 legs to mark, that you mark them all at the same time, top and bottom. That way you ensure your mortises are the same. Now I got to tell you that I don't normally use one of these. And I learned how to do this a long time ago, but I always use a cutting gauge and I mark the face side of my mortise only. And I use the chisel I want to get up there and cut it. And that's the way I learned how to do it. And somebody asked me one time, why do you do it like that? And how do you know the mortise is going to be right? It's because if I want a 1/2-inch mortise, I use a 1/2-inch chisel. And if I line the chisel up on the line I make, the other side of the chisel has to go along. Okay? It's not going to move. So if I need a 1/2-inch mortise, I'll use a 1/2-inch chisel. All right? Okay, let's talk about chisels. Since we talked about chisels, or we're talking about cutting, a good basic set of chisels are indispensable to you because you use them for fine fitting. And you see I got marked there 5 chisels, 1/4 inch through 1 inch. My chisels, I've got several sets of chisels, but my favorite set of chisels aren't in a rack on the wall. They aren't in a rack in my tool bag or tool chest. And why is that? Because you need to treat them nicer than that. Mine run around in chisel rolls, which they're protected from banging against everything else, and they have protectors on the end of them, because that edge is very, very delicate and it's polished if you treat them right, and that'll cut in this line that you have marked on. The way you find your line, you drag your chisel up there and that sharp chisel will fall right into that cut line. And you can cut there, and you always want to do it that way and keep your chisels very sharp. And a sharp set of chisels will chisel the baseline, and you don't have to worry about blowing it out. Now, there is a technique that you want to use in doing that. You don't want to make your first cut on the line. You want to make it about a 1/16 of an inch outside here with the bevel side down and take that chip out. And when you take that chip out, it forms a ledge right there. And the next time you put your chisel down, your chisel will follow that ledge and it will not blow this baseline out. And when you're cutting mortise and tenons, that is very, very important. So you want to treat your chisels very gently and very nicely. And again, They will serve you for a woodworking lifetime. This set of chisels right here, my wife bought me for my birthday in 1973, and I have used them ever since. I've got 3 or 4 other sets of good chisels, including Lee Nielsen chisels, and everybody, salivates over Lee Nielsen chisels. I don't like them, and the reason I don't like them is these chisels are cut at 25 degrees, and I work all the wood and musical instruments that I work very successfully. Lee Nielsen chisels are ground at 30 degrees, and they will bruise your cut line on soft wood. And for that reason, they stay in my box unless I'm cutting something else. But you need a good basic set of good quality chisels and a mallet. I don't care what you use. You can use one of these. You need a mallet that won't bounce. A claw hammer is not a good mallet. You need to be able to, and even choke up on it depending on your cut. And place your chisel in your baseline, and you want to blow that transfers directly to the chisel. You don't want to be chewing gum and looking off in space and doing this. You want to pay attention to where you're hitting and hit square and hit firmly. We'll talk about chisel buying here in a couple of minutes, but I want to give you some rules on chisels. You always, and underline always, you always clamp your work when you're using a chisel. I don't care what you're doing. If you're trimming an edge or whatever, I've seen people walk around the shop with a chisel like this, and they're going like this, okay? What they're doing is guaranteeing that maybe not today, but maybe someday they're going to slip, and they're going to see red stuff coming out of their finger. That is a dangerous practice, because if you do that, eventually you're going to cut yourself. And if you have maintained your chisel very well, you're going to cut yourself deep, and it's not going to be fun. So don't do that. Pay attention to your chisel where it's cutting, and you always clamp your work down, either with a hold fast or a clamp. That way you can work with the chisel, it'll stay in the baselines, and it will do a good job for you. The second mandate is never, and underline never, never point your chisel to any part of your body, because that is a sharp instrument. It's as sharp as a doctor's scalpel, and it'll make a cut, and it's usually a deep cut. Again, a true story. This happened to me. As you know, some of you may have friends in the Lee Summit Woodworkers Guild. You know about the Lee Summit Woodworkers Guild. I'm a member of that guild, and I conduct classes over there occasionally, because they don't have a shop, but they gather up in people's shops and have somebody come in, and I have conducted classes and programs for them. I was conducting a sharpening class one week in one guy's shop, and telling them about chisels and how to sharpen them. And I said that you never point a chisel to any part of your body. The next week was the meeting of the guild, and one of the guys that was in my class came in with a big bandage on his hand. And I thought he was kidding me around, And I said, "Jim, what happened to your hand?" And he said, "You know that rule that you told us about chisels?" And I said, "Yeah." And I still thought he was kidding me around. I said, did you cut yourself? And he said, "I was doing exactly what you said. I was trimming the edge of a board." And he said that the chisel slipped, and I tried to grab it, and when I did, it hit me right here on the hand, and when I grabbed, it pushed all the way up to here. And he said it cut all the way to the bone, and it cut every ligament and nerve in that in that section. And he said, since since I last talked to you, I've had 3 microsurgeries there, and I still got another one to go before I maybe can get full use of that hand again. Clamp your work down and never point a chisel at your hand. Okay? Let's talk about buying tools. When you buy tools, chisels included, you buy tools that, you know, I realize that not everybody has the money to buy the top quality Lee Nielsen or the other chisel. Blue spruce. Blue spruce to me is the pinnacle of chisels anymore, and they got chisels that are just absolutely dreamy to look at, and they're expensive. They're about $150 a chisel. You don't have to spend that much on chisels. You need a tool for a project that you're doing, and you buy quality tools, but you buy tools that are adequate for the job. And I'm telling you, if you're just starting out, there is no better chisel than the blue hand or the blue handled Marples chisels in our cabinet in there. Yeah, they got plastic handles, but they are well-designed chisels. They're fairly well balanced. They're made out of chrome vanadium steel. They're about the toughest thing in the world, and you can work either softwood or hardwood with them. And when you get them sharp, they stay sharp for a long time. That is the best chisel bargain you can find, and you can buy a 5 chisel set for about $50. And if you're looking for a serviceable chisel, that is a good chisel to buy. If you can, and we got the chisels in the cabinet back there, and I'm, you know, anytime I'm here with my chisels, you want to use one of them, you know, that's fine. If you can, when you're buying tools, try out the tool that you're thinking about, because you can find out whether it fits your hand. You can find out whether it's too heavy. You can find out how balanced it is. And if you can, try out your tools. Look for your tool, and look for your woodworking buddies, and try out one of their tools with their permission, I might add. But it's a good idea to try out tools that you're going to buy. We're going to talk about hand planes here in a minute. I'll give you a warning on tools. There are a number of tool dealers online, both antique tools and modern tools. There's also Amazon. You can get on Amazon and put in chisels, and you can find 400 people that want to sell you a chisel. You can get on eBay. You might find more than 400 that want to sell you a chisel. Be very, very wary of buying any tool there unless you know the tool, and do not buy it if you don't have the return privilege. When you look on eBay at a hand plane or a chisel or whatever you're looking at, if it says sales are final, then you have bought what you've got, whether it's any good or not. And I have seen some absolute trash come off of eBay, and people bring them in here and saying, I need to put this chisel back in order. Well, you know, that's a chisel they shouldn't have bought anyway. And if you don't have the privilege of returning a chisel or a hand plane or a saw, and saying this was either misrepresented or I didn't get what I paid for or whatever, you know, go a different way of buying your chisels. Buy from a reputable dealer or a online dealer that will give you the return privilege. And if you're just a tool junkie and you want to go to the garage sales and flea markets and stuff like that and pick up everything that you see, I suggest that maybe you're a tool restorer rather than a woodworker. And so it's a good idea to be cautious about what you buy in tools. You know, spend your money on tools that you can use and will last you a long time. And again, I told you on chisels, mine live right here in this chisel roll, and they don't get beat up and they don't get mistreated, and you need to treat your chisels nice. Let's talk about saws. We're talking about saws at this juncture because in woodworking, saws happen to be the most difficult tool to learn to use. And that may come as a surprise to most of you, because you don't use saws that much anymore. The old carpenters and cabinet makers and woodworkers used the rip saws and the crosscut saws, and they had several saws, and they earned their day's work from those saws. Modern woodworkers usually do not, unless you're all hand tool, usually do not become very proficient with saws, because you've got the table saws that make a whirring noise and cut, really neat. And you got the band saws, and you got a scroll saw in there, and they do a very good job. But saws are difficult to learn to use, and you realize that the first time you try to hand cut dovetails. Because when you hand cut dovetails, it is a very tactile exercise. You've got to learn to saw at an angle this way and an angle this way, and you've got to learn to saw straight up and down, and you've got to learn to saw at an angle this way and turn right around and saw at an angle this way. And you have to saw down to a marked baseline without violating that baseline if you want to do good dovetails. All of those things take practice to do. Now, in the Introduction to Hand Tool Woodworking class, we teach you how to do through dovetails and half-blind dovetails. And we explain to you that your first dovetail may look terrible. It may look like a beaver chewed it out for you. And after you do that about, I would say conservatively 20 times, you're going to be pretty good at it, okay? Because dovetailing takes a lot of practice. The first time you do it, you're not satisfied, and you continue to learn that motion as you go along. So on saws, for the general woodworker, you need a coping saw and spare blades, because this is a good saw to have around. This is your run-of-the-mill one. This is the Cadillac, okay? They do the same job, but there's a difference. This one is for general woodworking, and you can usually buy blades up to about 18 teeth per inch. This one will take any blade that you can put in a scroll saw, and goes between blade clamps, and you can vary the tension, and you can saw a really fine line like this. So if you want a blade that'll fit into your dovetail slot, go down to the base line and turn and across. If you want to do fine dovetailing, this is the saw. Unfortunately, this is pricey. You can buy one of these for $20 or less. And the first saw I ever owned in my woodworking endeavor was one of the old wireframe saws. And I learned how to use that saw when I think I was 7 years old. I got a saw like that now. It's not the same one, but the other saw you need is a 10 or 12 inch dovetail saw. Now you remember what I told you about assessing your woodworking? The question is, are you going to do any dovetails? And if the answer is no, you don't need this saw. Okay, you assess your tool needs based on what you're going to do. But this tool, if you're going to do dovetailing and if you're going to do fine joint fitting in your woodworking, you owe it to yourself to pull the stops and buy a good saw. because a saw is, again, a lifetime investment depending on how much you sharpen it. You can sharpen it down to where it's no longer usable, but you probably won't do that. My word on sharpening is I also know how to sharpen saws. I've got the vise at home, I've got the files. I learned how to sharpen saws when I was 13 years old. If you're just starting out in woodworking and you buy a dovetail saw, you don't have time to learn how to sharpen saws. You send this back to the manufacturer or take it to a professional saw sharpener, because if you hack around on this saw, you're going to ruin it. Okay? So be careful with your saws. These are very fine set. They only have about 3/1000ths set, one side to the other. But if you're going to do fine furniture fitting, and if you're going to do dovetailing, get you a good saw. Lee Nielsen's a good saw. Bad Axe is a good saw. Most of the English saws are good saws. Now the other saw that you might want to get is not expensive at all. You ever see one of these? This is a small Japanese pull saw. And where this comes in handy is if you got, like here, you got a proud dovetail and you want to saw this off flush, you can take this saw and saw it off flush, because these saws have no set. They're a straight blade, and when you saw like this, you won't mark this piece up. Okay, so for fine cutting or cutting off dowels or anything, you can use this little saw. You can buy one of these for less than $20. And it's a very handy saw to have around. You'd be surprised how many times you pick it up just to saw off a little piece or a little corner. And if you're not totally dedicated to hand tools, the big rip saws and crosscut saws, they call them panel saws, about this long, you don't need those. For the general woodworker, use your table saw, use the bandsaw to break your lumber down into fine fitting pieces, and then you use the lesser saws to refine your fit on them. Let's talk about planes, because again, that is a question that I get all the time. Which planes do I need? Well, I submit to you, if you're going to buy your first plane and you want the handiest plane around, buy a block plane, because they're good for just about everything. This is a Lee Nielsen block plane. Probably more expensive than most, but what a block plane is good for. Okay, a block plane is good for fitting small pieces. If you want to cut a chamfer on the end of a tenon, you can hold it up here like this, and you can chamfer that off on all four sides very, very quickly. And a block plane is probably the handiest plane you can have around, and you'll be surprised at how often you use it. My planes, if they came in a box, they stay in their box for their lifetime, and that goes in a drawer in my workshop. It doesn't hang on the wall. And the reason for it is I don't want that banged up, and I don't want it running against other stuff and messing itself up and messing other tools up. Now, if you're moderately into hand tool woodworking on planes, you should let the size of your work determine which planes you need. You don't need to look in the Stanley catalog and say, well, I'd like to have a number 1, but they're antiques now and they're very expensive. You can buy a Stanley number 1 plane antique. They're not made anymore. You can buy one for about $1,500 or $1,800 because the tool collectors have gathered them all up. and you probably never need one because they're only about this long, and for the modern American man, they fit totally inside your hand, and there's no place to hold them. They're just an unusable plane unless you're just fascinated with it. Don't even look at a number one. A number two may be the same way because it's a too small plane for general work. For usable plane for smoothing off small pieces like this. A number three is about your starting point. If you do work that is less than 3 feet long, a table height or a little bench like this, you will never need a plane longer than a number 5, okay? Because the way a plane works, you ever seen one of these big machines they use on the roads? They're called a road grader. It's got wheels up here and it's got wheels back here and it's got a big blade right in the middle. And they use them on roads when they got little humps of dirt and that they need to smooth out. And the grader comes along and the front wheel goes over and it drops down and the blade catches this hump and rakes it off and rakes it off, and about the third pass you got a smooth road. That's exactly the way this works. All right, if you got a rough board, you want a plane that spans the humps. If your humps are that space, you want a plane that'll ride over this hump and the blade will catch it and cut it off. And you want the blade to be able to catch the next hump and cut it off. And about the third or fourth pass, you find out you've cut all the humps off and you can get to smoothing. And that's the way a plane works. You choose the plane based on the length of your work. For general woodworking, if you're working less than 3 feet, these two planes are the two you need, a number 4 or a number 3 and a number 5. And if you tune those planes up and you keep them nice, again, that's a lifetime investment. I bought this plane in 1982. I still use it all the time, but it's a good plane. Now I've got some Lee Nielsen planes and I treasure them. They work very nice. You can buy one of these on the used market. If you look at one in a flea market or an antique shop and you can touch it and feel it and it feels solid, you can buy one of these for $50 to about $100 is what the price range goes on them. If you want to buy a new one of these from Lee Nielsen, it'll cost you like $300. Okay, so you can get them all prices. Let me give you some pointers on buying a plane. First of all, you want to look at the plane right here because that's right next to the what they call the throat of the plane, and if anybody has dropped that plane on the floor, it will crack right here, okay? And most of the time it don't crack on the other side, so look at both sides of the plane. If it's got a crack in it, put it back down and go someplace else and buy your plane, because that plane is not restorable. I don't care what they say. You can take it to the best welder and he can grind a channel and then he can braze it or he can silver solder it back together. And what happens to metal when you heat it and let it go back to room temperature? What happens to that, John? Stretches. It does not.
Stresses.
And it stresses. It does not go back to its original shape. Therefore, if you got a crack here and you weld it back together, what happens there? That side of the plane is longer than this side of the plane, and your blade will not mount square, and that plane may be uneven down here, so it won't do a good job for you. So don't buy planes with cracks in them. If you look right here, if there's any nicks or cracks in here, you don't buy that plane. Another place to look is look on the handle. If the handle is broken back here, or if that is broken off, yeah, you can replace that. But what is this a good indication of? If that is broken, it says the guy that owned the plane before you're thinking about buying it didn't respect his tool, and he mistreated it, and probably something else is wrong with it. So if you got one with broken handles, do not buy it. The other thing that's a pet peeve of mine, and I can spot them if I go to a flea market, I can spot them all the way across the room. If you find a tool, I don't care whether it's a chisel or a plane or whatever, if it's got spattered paint drippings on it, don't buy it. Again, what does that tell you? It means the guy that had the plane before left it out everywhere. He spilled paint on it. He didn't care about it. He didn't maintain it right. And you don't want his troubles. Okay? So those are plane buying guides. Let me talk to you about a specialty plane here, and it's called a shoulder plane. This plane is used for mortise and tenons, all right, to face off a tenon. You cut it and it may be a bit too thick. You put this plane up there and this blade cuts to the side on both sides, and you can get right up on the shoulder of a tenon and you can trim it off, and you can do a very good job. Do not buy this plane. This is a Lee Nielsen plane. It's off of a 1880s Preston patent plane. And this is the most unwieldy, unergonomic plane that you can put your hand on. And I want you to come up here. This is the one out of the tool cabinet in the back. We've got 3 of them. And this plane is just totally impossible to use because there's no place to hold it. You can't hold it up here steady. You put your hand down here and it'll cramp your hand. There's no place to hold it here. This is not a good tool. Lee Nielsen is a good tool, works, but this is not a good tool. What I would urge you to buy, if you need a shoulder plane, is this plane. This is called a Lee Nielsen number 60.5 RN, and that stands for, it's a 60.5 pattern. It's this long, and the original 60.5 had an adjustable throat on it, but this one is what's called rabbit cut, the R designation. This is rabbit cut, which means the iron extends to the side on both sides, and it does exactly the job as this plane. Okay, but this plane will serve both as a block plane and a shoulder plane. So if you're budget minded and you're ergonomic minded, your hand fits this one. There's a place to hold it, and it works perfect for tenons. Buy this plane, and it will serve you very, very well. Again, if it comes in a box, you store it in the box and you put it in the drawer. You don't hang it on the wall. Okay, that's about planes. Are you tired yet? Let's talk about miscellaneous tools. I got a whole bench full of stuff here that may come in handy for you. And one of the first ones I want to point out, I don't care what you do, you need some kind of a small sanding block. Okay? And this happens to be a sanding block that I make. And down here at the Guild, I know I've made 500 of these and brought them down here. In the early days of the shop, I'd bring a box of these down, and to support the Guild, we'd sell them for $3 a piece or 2 for $5. And some of you may still have 1 or 2 or 3 of these things, but they're easy to make. That's all made out of scrap wood. You can make you a sanding block. You don't have to make it this shape. That's just an idea, okay? You need a small honing stone or a diamond stone. Right here is one I carry around in my toolbox. It's got 2 sides to it. It's got two sides to it, and a package is really hard to open. This one is a fine. On this side, it's kind of coarse. On this side, it's kind of slick. This is a fine and an extra fine stone. I told you to pay attention to sharp tools. You know how you keep your tools sharp? The answer is really, really, really easy. You keep your tools sharp by never letting them get dull. Okay? And that doesn't register with most people. They will use a tool and use a tool and use a tool until it won't cut. And then when it won't cut, what do? They don't sharpen it, they hammer on it. Okay? If you want your tools to stay sharp, get in the habit. And I learned this from an old man that taught me. Every day, when he wrapped up what he was doing, every day he'd take the chisel rolled out. He'd look at every chisel. And if he had used a chisel, he'd check it out. And if it was needed sharpening, he'd go over to the stone he had there, and he'd do about 3 strokes, and he'd put it back in the roll. And he'd do that with every chisel and every plane he used that day. And I asked him one day, I said, why do we have to hang around and do that? It's time to go eat dinner. And he said, I do that so that when I get here in the morning, I don't have to do it. He said, when I walk through the door, I know I'm going to be working that day with sharp tools. And I offer that to you because it's my practice also. You'll see me, when I use a chisel, I grab the stone and I slick that chisel edge up. Now, let me give you a good hint, because it's easier than even that. You don't have to buy a diamond stone. If you go down to your tool place and you buy you a sheet of Mirka carborundum paper, 1500 grit, all right? It's sandpaper. You put it down on a flat surface like this, on your saw table or on your jointer or on your planer, a flat surface. You can take your chisels and your plane irons, and you do 3 strokes on the back and do about 3 strokes on the front. You check the edge and you're ready to go, if you used it. If you let that chisel wear off to where it really needs sharpening, you're going to spend 30 minutes sharpening it. You can spend 30 seconds here every day or every time you use it, and you can keep that chisel sharp. Okay? What else do you need? Here, I got a great story for you. A 12 or 16 ounce Carpenter or a Warrington hammer, one of those little ones with the cross pin on them for driving the breads. I don't have a hammer with me today. And you heard me say don't loan your tools, or loan your tools very carefully. You know why I don't have a hammer with me today? Because I have hammers in the basement. And a while back my wife wanted to hang a picture. And she said, can you bring a hammer upstairs? Now, mind you, I've got a tool drawer in the kitchen cabinet with pliers, a small hammer, several small boxes of nails, 4 screwdrivers, a tape measure. All of that is in the kitchen drawer. That hammer, I got her a hammer for her in there, but the hammer was not in the drawer. I don't know where it is. But I loaned her my hammer. Yesterday, when I was getting all this stuff together, I said, I want that little claw hammer. I said, where is it? And she said, oh, I loaned it to your daughter. So my daughter, my hammer that I was going to bring to show you today is at my daughter's house. That's the reason I don't have a hammer. Okay. Do you ever come down here to the guild and want to drill a simple hole and go over to that cabinet over there and try to find a drill bit the right size? Okay, did you ever do that? And what happens to the drill bits over there? actually, we've had some new drill bits over there, and they work pretty good, but everybody that goes over to use one, they'll poke through there and they'll get one, and they'll come and use it. Do they ever put them back where they got them? No. They either go in the cabinet in there in that little thing on the wall, or they go in the wrong pocket in the drawer. So if you need to use a drill on the drill press or on the electric drill, sometimes it'll take you 15 or 20 minutes or longer to find the right size drill. You know how I combat that? I carry my drills with me. This is a drill index, and it's got drills in it from 1/16 to 1/4 of an inch, and all I have to do is turn it to the right size, and I got the drill that I need. And when I get done, I take it out and I put it back in here, and it's there the next time that I need it. And I do that on a lot of drills. I do that on the larger drills. I carry this around with me. I've got the drills I need. And do I loan these to anybody? No. The answer is no. You know what happens on these little drills like this? They break. And you know why they break? Down here at the shop, I've watched people use drills like that. And when you use a drill in an electric drill, you very carefully, and I'll show you a little punch here in a minute, but you punch you a starting hole or a starting dimple, and you hold the drill straight up and down, and you go in and you drill the drill. I'll dare you, when somebody's drilling with the drill, to ever find somebody that goes straight up and down. They'll get over here and they'll drill like that, and when they find the drill going crooked, what do? They try to straighten it up this way. And what happens when you do that to your drill, John? It breaks. It goes ping, and then they take their pair of pliers and they pull that broken drill out. And when they're done doing that, they go get another one. That's the way of the drills. You need to carry your own drills. Did you ever come down here and have something you needed to take a screw out of? Okay. Do you ever go back there in the cabinet and find a screwdriver you could use? You ever come down here and want to adjust one of your planes, or one of your tools has a screw adjustment on it? You ever go back there and find a screwdriver you could use? No. Carry your own screwdrivers, okay, on the sizes you use. They don't take up much room, they're cheap. You know, buy a good screwdriver, take care of it, and don't use it to pry off paint can lids, and don't use it as a chisel in a quick pinch. You can buy these, and I use these occasionally. This is a ratcheting screwdriver, and you can change directions either for driving a screw or taking it out. And the good thing about this is all these standard screw points that you find will go in there, and it's magnetic, will hold that, and this handle up here will hold several different sizes if you want them. If you only want to carry one screwdriver and you want something handy in your box, get you one of these. They don't cost much, and they're handy to have. A 4-in-hand rasp. Actually, I got one in my bag there. I didn't get it out, but you need a rasp, a 4-in-hand rasp. In fact, I'll get one out here to show you the difference. If it's still in here. Well, we're running out of time. There it is right there. A 4-in-hand rasp is a rasp. It's about 8 inches long, and it's got four sides on it. It's got a flat side coarse, it's got a flat side fine, it's got a round side coarse and a round side fine. when you're cutting dovetails or when you're fitting joints or making a tenon, if it's a little bit too thick, instead of trimming it off with the plane, if you just got just a hair to trim off, you can hold this flat and make about 2 passes, and you can fit that tenon. You can try it, pull it out, and do a couple more. This is a handy tool I have. This is a dedicated one, but there's another tool that a friend gave me that I have used quite a lot, and I didn't think I ever would. But if you need to shape wood, like if you need to shape a handle or something like that, this is called a saw rasp. All right, and I'm sure you've seen one, but this is a very, very handy tool. You can take wood off very quickly. It's a rough tool, but you can take wood off quickly, and I'll show you what you can do with this. I'm in the process of making me a new mallet. All right, and I shaped this handle with this rasp, so you can take off wood very quickly, and so that's that. You need a 4-in-hand rasp. Does everybody know what a nail set is? All right. Why do you need these?
Your nail.
You need these to finish driving a small nail or brad. And when you're working with fine wood and you're fitting a fine joint or a fine molding or something like that, what's your problem? Take my hammer that I don't have, but when you're driving a small nail, okay, and you're driving it in a place, what happens? You hit, your hammer slips off, and it bangs the piece of wood and makes a dent in it. And then you have to sand that out, and or maybe put some wood putty in it or whatever. You can avoid that, and I saw one over here a while ago, but see if I can borrow a tool. Let me tell you how to do that. And we'll talk about this tool here in a minute. But everybody know, John, you know what this is. This is an automatic machinist center punch. All right? You put it down, and you press it, and it makes a small dimple right where you want that nail to go. If you put the nail there and start it with a couple of taps with a hammer, and you put your putty knife right here, and you drive that nail down, and your hammer slips off, it doesn't bang your wood, it bangs the putty knife. And then when you get right there, you can take one of your nail sets, the proper size for the nail that you're using, and you can set right on top of that, and you can drive that nail home below the surface, and you haven't banged up the surface of your wood. That's what a nail set's for. Okay, let's talk about the next wood, glue scrapers. Everybody knows what a glue scraper is, and everybody knows why you need one. My question is, why don't all of you have one? There was one around here. Anyway, get you a glue scraper. We passed out a bunch of them here the last time that we were together like this. There you go. There's a glue scraper. Make you a small glue scraper like this with the paint scraper blade, and if you have squeeze out on your glue, you scrape this off when it gels over, not when it dries 3 or 4 days, and you can get it off very easily. And you can, here you go, Mike. You can get it off very easily, but you clean up your glue, or better yet, you don't have any squeeze out. Be very careful with your gluing and get just a little bit of squeeze out, because that glue that squeezes out doesn't glue anything. Okay? It's just wasted glue, and besides all that, it messes up everything, and it gets on your shirt. My wife hates it when I get glue on my shirt. So get you a glue scraper. You need an 8 or 10 inch mill file. right here like this. Okay, you need that for sharpening your glue scraper. Okay, you can also sharpen a wood scraper like this with a mill file. You do it very carefully. You can do it without one of those fancy jigs if you know how. One of these days we'll have a class on that. Screw pilot drills with countersinks. How many of you ever come down here and want to use what do I do with them? There they are. Want to use one of the countersink screw pilots in the cabinet back there. They're called snappy tools. What happens when you go back there and pull that out? Half of them are missing. The drill bits and the rest of them that are there are broken, and that's why nobody's using them. And you can't count on that snappy set back there, even though it's a very nice set. I've got one at home. Well, when I come down here, I carry these with me. These are the cheapies. I mean, these cost, I think you can buy these for $10 or $12, and when Menards or somebody has them on sale, they're $5 or $6. But you got 5 different sizes. You got a little Allen wrench. You can adjust the drill depth, and that makes a 60-degree countersink, and it's great. You need a countersink, carry your own with you. Don't count on what's down here. An awl. What happened to my awl? It's around here somewhere. This happens to me at home. I lose my tools. Anyway, an awl is there it is, right there. An awl. Does everybody have an awl? You need an awl, and you need an awl for when you drill a hole with your screw pilot or your drill that you have, and you want that drill to start in the right place and not walk and wiggle around until you get it started. There's 2 things that you can do. You can take this thing that I showed you already, and you can drill you or you can make you a starting point just like that, or you can do it very easily and put this right where you want to start your drill and just lean on it, and you got the same thing. Get you one of these. You'll use it for everything. Okay, we're heading down the home stretch here. I dropped my book. Okay. You ever come down here and you need to adjust something on a drill press or on one of the saws over there, or if you use Lee Valley tools? Lee Valley tools have fine adjustment screws in them everywhere. And what do you note about Lee Valley tools and their fine adjusting screws that's not true of American tools? This is an easy one. They're metric. And standard Allen wrenches don't fit in them. When you come down here and you need to adjust something, does everybody know where our Allen wrenches in the shop are? No? Do you know where they are? They're in that cabinet over there. And what do you note about them? There's metric ones over there, and there is SAE ones over there, and half of them have the handles broken on them. Okay? I don't ever worry about those. I even forgot where those were over there. I carry my own little Allen set with me. It's got these sizes, and you can get these common sizes in metric. These don't take up much room in your toolbox, just like that, and you don't have to go looking for the right size Allen wrench. Okay, Allen wrench set, small magnifying glass. A lot of times I need to look at a chiseled edge or a sawtooth or a way a joint's fitting. I got me a small magnifying glass. It's 2 different power. You can get one of these for $5 or $6. You can sit there and you can look close to anything. And the really good use of these is to find those aggravating little splinters that get in your hand from the wood that you're working on. You can see them really good and find out where they are. All right, and what does it say after the magnifying glass? Look on your list.
Tweezers.
Tweezers. You can go to your local CVS store. You can get a little plastic thing like this for about $3, and you can get 2 sets of tweezers in there that are just right for pulling out splinters. I carry them around with me all the time, and so yeah, we'll put those back in a minute. What else do I want to show you? A small bottle of Tight Bond 2 glue or whatever kind of glue you use. And I've had 1 million people come in the door and start to do something, and when I'm shop foreman, they come over and say, we don't have any glue in the cabinet back there. And I say, we're not supposed to have any glue in the cabinet. That's left over from somebody else's project or a turf box project or whatever. You didn't bring your own glue? Huh? We're supposed to have glue at the shop. Nope. You bring your own glue. You need a utility knife or a pocket knife in your tool kit. I got an old beater pocket knife that I don't know how long I've had this thing, but this is a pocket knife that stays in my tool kit, and I use it all the time. I want to sharpen a pencil, I want to cut off an edge, I want to trim a splinter off of something, I can do it. The other thing that people come in asking for is, where's the blue tape? We don't have any blue tape back there. Does your guild membership entitle you to blue tape? No. You bring your own blue tape. I keep a roll in my box. When they go to pattern routing, they say, where's the double-sided tape to stick the template down? There's none back there. And I know, it should be in your toolbox. You carry double-sided tape in your toolbox. Okay. When you come in here and you need screws, brad nails, sandpaper, whatever else you need for your project, there's not any back there. All that stuff is left over. If you happen to find a screw you can use back there, certainly you're welcome to it. But you can spend 30 minutes looking through that jar back there and maybe find 2 screws that are the same. And you want better than that. A dusting brush or cheap 4-inch brush. This is what I carry in the box, even though I have a Lee Nielsen dusting brush. Why do you have one of these? When you get done with your hand plane, brush the crap out of it, because that attracts moisture and that will rust your plane. When you get all your tools cleaned up, you get the dustpan and you dust off the bench and clean up after yourself. When you're chiseled out, and that gets all over your work, you can't do good work if you can't see it. You take your waste out of the way and keep your workplace clean while you're working, and certainly leave it clean. So you carry a brush. A Stanley push drill. I don't know whether most of you know what this is or not, but this is a little drill, and I bought this one in 1956, okay, and I still have it, and all of the drills are still usable, and you put this little point in here, and it locks in. You can take this and put in your little dimple, and you can drill whatever screw starter hole you want, or brad starting hole that you want, or whatever. And the great thing about this is the battery has never run down in this. When I come in here and I grab one of those drills back there and I start it up and it goes zip, and that's it, and I gotta wait for the battery to charge, I get kind of discouraged, so I carry one of these. Now, if you're lucky, you can find one of these in a garage sale for $2 or $3. And I happened to find this in an antique store in the original box. This is a fancy one, but I bought this one for $8. Those are the handiest tools that you can find. Try to find you one. I'm not going to talk about center points because I don't want to talk about those today. Those are special use, but I want to show you one more quickie thing because you can use it all the time. And let me find a couple of pieces that, okay, when you're dry fitting stuff, I want to show you this. When you're dry fitting stuff and you put these two together like this, and maybe even you want to drive a nail in here, or you want to take one of the air guns and shoot a bread in there. You know, invariably you're trying to hold 5 things at the same time. You ever see any corner clamping blocks? And John makes a very nice set of box clamps to fit on the outside, but those won't work on a tall cabinet, John. But if you've got a tall cabinet and you're fitting the top like this, all right, you fit them like that and you clamp them. And you can hold that together. That holds firm. You can buy 4 of these. I think these were $10 or something like that. Carry those around with you because when you're dry fitting, you need those. Now I want to show you something that's just absolute cut rate handy as the world is level. You know what these are? Those are corner brackets. Cabinet makers, when they put this particle board together to make your kitchen cabinets, put these in the corner to stiffen things up and hold it square. You can buy 2 of these in a package for about $2.89. You see, like that? And I checked them. They're pretty dang good and square. You know what they're good for? When you want to fit a piece like this, you put that right there. And you take one of your spring clamps. You take one of your spring clamps like that. All right. And you put this right here like this. And you put your other spring clamp over here. Like that. If you buy 4 of these, you can corner fit up just about anything you want, and you've done it very economically, and you can do anything you want with that. You can put a screw in it, you can drive a nail in it, whatever. Those things are handy. I carry 4 of them around with me all the time. Now, that's corner clamps. Let's go. Let's talk about bags, boxes, and totes, because we're running out of time. This is a tool bag that I carry tools in. This is a tote that I made. We can have a class on making one of these. That's a pretty straightforward piece to make. Or you can make you one like this. Make you a small carrier for your tools so that remember what we called it? The visiting toolbox. You can put them all in those. You can pick them up and carry it wherever you want to go with it. A wood tote box will sit at the end of your bench. You can make it, but don't make it too big. You can make one of these that when you put a couple of hand planes in and some of these hand tools and all of that, you can't pick it up. Don't do that. Make it the size of the tools you're going to use that day, okay? And it will serve you very well. Let's talk about some good tool rules. I already said, buy the best you can afford. Forget the good enough to learn on myth. Learn how to sharpen your tools. Keep your tools sharp, dry, and safe. And do not loan your tools out except to trusted woodworking acquaintances. Sad story on me, you know, I make a lot of jigs, and I've made some pretty complicated jigs, and I had a jig that I made up for making boxes and getting the corner angles exactly straight. And I had a friend that had exactly the same table saw as mine, a Powermatic 66. And he was forever coming over and borrowing my jig. He lived within a couple of miles of me, and I didn't mind it too much. However, every time he borrowed my jig and I wanted to use it, I had to go to his house and get it. He never brought it back, and I got to looking for my jig one time, and then I realized that he passed away. And when they had his estate sale, I went and I thought maybe I can get my jig back. They sold it with his saw. So now I've got to make me another box jig. Don't loan your tools, and if you loan your hammer to your wife, go get it at your daughter's house. Don't borrow tools without permission, and this is just plain old courtesy. I've been here in the shop, and it actually happened to me. I was working. I wasn't foreman that day. I was working, and I mislaid my square. And I looked on my bench. I couldn't find it. I looked over at the saw where I was working. I couldn't find it. And I thought, what happened to my square? And then I walked by another bench over there, and I said, hey, that looks like my square. And I asked the guy, I said, did I leave my square over here? And he said, oh no, he said, I needed one, and I came over and borrowed yours. And that kind of rubs me the wrong way, because he doesn't use the square the same as I would use it, and he won't treat it nicely. And not only that, he didn't bring it back. Okay? Don't misuse your tools. Okay? A good basic tool set is the key to precise, consistent, quality woodworking. That's you. Okay? Acquiring and maintaining your own tools will make you a better woodworker. And my ending thought is, thank you. We'll do this again sometime. Thanks for being here, guys. Anybody want to touch anything?
Yes.
Try anything out?
Can we?
Sure.
A special thank you to our guest today. For more information about the Guild, upcoming classes, and events, please visit our website kcwg.org. You can also find us on social media by searching for Kansas City Woodworkers Guild. And remember to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications.